How's it going, church family? Good to see you guys. Thank you for watching another one. It's been a little while, been a little bit behind, but that's okay. Um, let's see. It's Thursday. If you're watching this and it's not Thursday, then okay. Good for you. Glad you're doing that. Anyways, hey, look, I thought I would open up and talk about something that came up on Sunday, something that came up in our small group that I think we need to be thinking about as a church. And so let me just show you. Here's the passage that we are dealing with. We're going through Matthew chapter 6 now. And so notice what we see here. So Matthew 6, it says, be careful to not practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father in heaven. And whenever you give to the poor, don't sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and do in the streets to be applauded by people. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. But when you give to the poor, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Okay, so this is the piece that I wanted to just bring up, something to think about today. You read that, and the main thing that you kind of have to wrestle with, right, is, okay, how do I make sure that I'm not somebody trumpeting my own giving? How am I make sure that when I'm giving the way that Jesus says to give, which is it's between me and it's between the Lord, that I want to make sure that I'm somebody who gives in secret, somebody who is not showcasing the amount or my name and putting to stuff. And I think the church needs to help kind of create boundaries for that as well. Here's the other thing that I think is another little point to think about when you do this. When you read this passage, there's two things that Jesus does. And notice what he says here. He says, whenever you give, verse 2. And then he says this in verse 3, but when you give to the poor. And here's what's important about that. The major assumption is of this passage is that you're going to be benevolent, generous, charitable in your giving. So it's not a little video to say, hey, let's step it up. Because let's face it, trying to do this right, I don't want to know what you give. That's not, I don't ever see that. And that's important because I never want that to be, how we relate to each other. And I don't ever want that to be even breaking what we see in James about like favoritism or anything like that based on what I think who's a better giver or not. So that's not what this is about. What I do think this is about is personally in your own generosity. So I do think that here's how things are set up, right? That even if you read the Old Testament, God has set up a tithe, that the tithe was what you were to give. It's kind of the bare minimum, actually. And then there were other offerings and things that you would do. It does appear, based on this passage, that this is something that we should be doing just in our regular practice that is beyond our tithe. So I don't think it's sufficient to say, well, I give to the church. Okay, well, how? You give, do we give your tithe? Do you give your bare minimum of kind of what the Bible was? Now, everyone always want to pull out that, well, a cheerful giver. Okay, great. If you're not cheerful, then that's fine. You just want to remain uncheerful in all your giving. You got things to work on. Okay, but let's talk about, let's push the regular giving. I just want to talk about the charitable piece, right? So one of the things that we were challenged talking about in our small group just last night was the idea that I need to be more charitable. You need to be more charitable. So how do we do that? And how do we do it as a family? I think every family needs to come up with a plan because you guys are wired differently. There's certain needs that you zone in on. There's certain ways that you want to try to meet the needs of people. And obviously the time frame from this is, in the context, is different than ours. I mean, you have to think about when you're dealing with Jesus's time frame. There's no safety net. There's no government programs, anything like that, right? And so needs meant something. Today, people say, I have a need. Oh, I need help. And what that means is you're convenient often. You're convenient right now. I don't want to do the extra work to get the help because we know just where we're at located-wise, how many places we partner with that you really never have to go hungry. You never have to worry about clothing. You never have to worry about shelter, right? And yet we know people who just, they don't care. So I'm not talking about that. But I do think that every family needs to consider, how am I going to give? And so for some of you, maybe that's something your heart aches for, kind of what you see there. For some of you, maybe it aches in a certain way. Maybe you're wired for a certain way. Some of you, maybe you don't have much to give. You can serve, and you can find places. One thing that we're going to do is try to find a spot where our small group can serve together. Maybe it's food or clothing or things like that. So you have to find, how can I meet the need? How can I be somebody who can be a generous giver? Whether that's my time or my abilities, my money, my resources. But we should be people that are called to give. And so I want to challenge you to think about that. When you see need and you hear of need, are you going to be someone who says, well, I just don't know how I'm going to do that? Or do you have some sort of a game plan that says, no, this is how we're going to do it. I can't meet every need. You're never going to meet every need. And that's not to say that God will sometimes stop you in your plans and say, deal with this, do this now. Because we know that happens. That there's sometimes you just can't shake it, that you really just feel that, it's this feeling. You got to always sift through. Is this the Lord or is this my feeling, right? But you feel like God has kind of told you to deal with this situation, led you to deal with this right now. I think there's that piece to be mindful of too, but I think just having a game plan of how are we going to be generous. And one thing that was brought up too, and I think this is really insightful, to one of the things that was said last night, was we want to make sure we're not people who say, well, I'm not going to give to that. I never give to that, because I know here's how they're going to use the money or things like that. But then you don't give somewhere, right? So you say, I don't give towards those things because you have your reasons for how or why you want to be wise in your giving. And you say, this is why I won't do it, but there's no excuse for why you're not somewhere, right? So begin to think about that. Where do I serve? Where do I give? How do I do that? Maybe it's benevolence, as we do it every month. Maybe it's a place, we partner with St. Vincent de Paul. If you want to get back in on serving there, that's a great thing. Maybe you and your family, maybe your Bible study needs to find a place to just say, look, I'm going to give. And I'm going to give, without ever knowing. Like, you're not there to snap photos. You're not there to make sure people know all that you have done. But you're there to and if you do, it's there to point out the opportunities, not of how great you are, right? Because that would once again be, breaking the spirit of what we just see here in this passage. All right, I hope that's been helpful to you. Find a place. If you're in a Bible study right now, get your Bible study together. Find out where you guys can serve together, how you can give together. If you have that conversation with your spouse, how are we going to be generous givers? All right, that's all I want to talk about. We'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.